sailing a safe, sane course through life. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be a different kind of experience to get up in the morning and to be confident instantly because you knew you possessed something inside of you that was stronger than the day, that was stronger than the world out there, which you now fear? Sailing the sea, if you're out in the actual boat and you're sailing out there and you look out and you see something coming out of the water, protruding out of the water, and you see the rocks, you see the reefs, and you see the sharks out there. Do you understand why you're afraid out there in the ocean? It's because you do not understand thoroughly the rocks and the reefs and the sharks. And what we fail to understand, we always fear. We always tremble before and are defeated by it. What we're going to do now is to explore, understand the rocks and the reefs in human nature and human behavior, inside ourselves and inside everyone else, so that we can begin to understand what we formerly misunderstood. And when that understanding, you listen to me, when that understanding is complete, when it's thorough, which can be done, you'll get up in the morning and you won't even think of the crisis or the problem or that person as an enemy or as an object to fear. All the strength you need, all the power you need will be within you because you understand at last what life is all about. Are you aware of the fact that there's so many things going on inside your mind, inside your emotions, that you don't comprehend? And that feeling of loneliness comes up, that feeling of desperation, of not knowing which way to turn, of the dozens of decisions you have to make every day. They're inside of you, but you don't know what to do with them. And so you do the only thing you know to do, which is to fear them. I am telling you, it can all be erased, the whole business. Let me give you a little illustrative story on that. There were a group of people, men and women, 15, 20, 25, gathered in a home for an evening of social talk and dinner. And after the dinner, they all came to the living room and just started talking in general about life. And one man suggested, let's find out, each one of us, what is the thing we want most of all in life? They thought that'd be interesting to explore it a little bit, so they volunteered one at a time what they wanted out of life most of all. And of course, as you might expect, one man said, I'd like more money. I'd like a promotion. I'd like elevation in my business career. So that's what he wanted. Another woman spoke up and she said, I'd like my home life to be more tranquil, less quarreling, less conflict, less heartache in my home. Fine. Another man came on and he said, well, what I want most of life is to do a lot of traveling. I always wanted to be running around somewhere, other parts of the world, and seeing the great buildings and the great forests and jungles of other lands. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to travel. They finally get to the end of the group where there's a young lady seated there. And she was the only one who hadn't contributed yet. And so after a little bit, she spoke up and she said, what I would like is to no longer be afraid of life. What I would like is to no longer be afraid. Now, isn't that a marvelous desire? Something that is worthwhile, so you've got all the money, and you get so excited over that promotion, and you get so excited because you're going to go on that trip. And by the way, guess what you're going to find at the end of that trip? You know already, don't you? You're smiling. You know what you're going to find. You're going to find yourself again. And what is more miserable than that? To spend all that money, fight all that traffic, put up with all the things you have to put up with, and you end up in front of a mirror. There's a wiser way to live. And that wiser way is to say to yourself something like this. All right, here I am, 30, 40, 60, 70 years old. And all my life, I've never known what to do with myself. I really have never known what to do with myself. And I've been very grateful for compulsive duties that said, you be at work at 8, you go home at 5, or you do this on the weekend, you mow the lawn or whatever, or you wash the dishes. People are very grateful to compulsive duties because if they didn't have those, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. Wouldn't you like a kind of a life where you lived it so fully, so completely, that you don't have to have tyrants over you to tell you to do something so you won't feel lonely? Do you understand what I'm talking about? You see, we fear to be without compulsive duties, and because of that foolishness, in our ignorance, we deliberately seek them out so that we have something to occupy our mind and our actions and our lives. We deliberately seek out distractions because we fear to face our own emptiness. We fear to face our own lack of knowledge about the reefs out there. Ladies and gentlemen, don't you think it's about time that we slowed down, that we sat down quietly somewhere, and we looked inside our lives, and we looked around at the results of our living up till now, and we say to ourselves, as much as I resist self-change, self-investigation, self-knowledge, as much as I resist it, I'm going to go ahead with it anyway, because my life as I am now unliving it, not living it, my life as I am now living it is no life at all. This is a marvelous turning point for you if you can see this, because you're beginning to see the difference between mechanical living and conscious living. You're beginning to recognize that you're not going anywhere. All your money, all your daydreams, all your imaginations, all your excitement, they are all you have, and you recognize for the first time your inner poverty. It's a marvelous condition for any man or woman who does indeed do this, who comes to a halt and just sits down. He says, I'm going to look around and see where I'm going. And when he does that, she does that, they can begin to see the actual cause of this aching, heartache feeling of loneliness and of isolation. How many of you are lonely? You know very well that you are. And let me tell you something about you lonely people. You have hundreds of friends, don't you? And you have dozens of friends. And you may have a bank account that you can pick up and look at and say, that's my friend, some friend. $1 million in the bank, and you don't know what to do with yourself. All these plans for traveling somewhere, and you meet a stranger for the first time and you don't know how to behave. You get nervous just by looking at that stranger's face. Do you know what that means? Shall I tell you in very simple, clear words? It means you're not living from your real nature at all. It means you're living from a nature that always calculates. And it always calculates, how can I get the maximum amount of benefit out of this individual or out of this situation? Or, to the opposite of that, how can I avoid getting hurt by that person or by that situation, by that circumstance? You see, in thinking like this, which is utterly wrong thinking, there is a self. a false self, a built-up personality. And this personality, which is built up of all our past experiences, of our desires to get, to gain, this personality never, listen to this please, please understand this, this invented personality can never, never, never be secure. It's always walking on sand, slipping sideways, always worried about the next event coming along to make it fall down. Let me ask you this question up to this point. Do you recognize yourself in what I've been talking about? Do you understand that I am describing your daily life? All right. If we then can admit, simply see that we're living a life, well, let me give you a few words. Living a life of tension, living a life of uncertainty, of self-doubt, of nervousness, of wondering where we're going to get hurt next. Now I'll ask you another question. Deep inside, is there at least one small part of you that says, I want to be different? If there is that, that is beautiful. That's the beginning of a different kind of rebellion, an inner rebellion. What good does it do to rebel against that outer world out there? You change one thing that's wrong and another wrong thing takes its place, right? You say you're going to find someone who's going to love you, and you get involved with that man or with that woman, and it's all moonlight and roses for the first few days or the few weeks. And then you start getting dislike for each other. You begin to see that it was all a stage performance, and the actors were two people who were desperate. And then in our desperation being the same thing as ignorance, in our desperation we say, maybe this is it at last. It's that man, it's that woman, it's that other location, it's that other excitement, it's that new education or whatever. Please start to recognize that you're on the wrong path if you always end up right back where you started with your own aches. If you were to recognize that the problem is just one thing, you'd begin to change it. Now, what is this one thing? The one thing that is making our lives so bad that we don't like to tell other people about it. Have you noticed that? We don't like to admit how wrong we are, how we tell petty lies all the time, and how afraid we are. There's one thing that can begin to change you. Look, this is so simple, don't miss it. To know absolutely that there is something seriously wrong with you, and forget what's wrong with that world, because what's wrong with that world is what's wrong with every human being on earth. Well, now you tell me, what causes wars? Those rifles don't go off by themselves. Those airplane bombers don't bomb by themselves. They have to have something behind them, which is called human beings, which is called human minds, which is called confused society. All wrongness, crime, or whatever it is, has to have a human being in the back of it. Now, that's obvious, isn't it? Obvious. You face inside yourself right now where you have contributed to the madness of this society that we're in. You see where you have contributed to it, and you will also see where you have been punishing yourself all your life and didn't realize it. And the reason you didn't realize it is because you justified your bad behavior. You justified your inner violence. You said, this is the way they do to me. Why shouldn't I do it to them? Did you ever hear a more childish statement than that? Just because someone else had behaved badly toward you, you take that as justification for doing the same to them. Now, a 5-year-old kid will do that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're supposed to be adults. We're supposed to grow up. We're not supposed to be infantile, childish, foolish anymore. And especially, we're not supposed to be self-defeating anymore. A child needs instructions. He doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong, so he grows up and he learns. Spiritually, psychologically, why don't we start with a simple principle that we are immature as far as our inner state is concerned? Now, what's wrong with admitting that? You tell me what's wrong with you saying, anyone saying, you know, I really see for the first time the connection between my personal anger and war. Well, what do you think war is? But the anger of billions of foolish, lost human beings. And if those millions of lost human beings were to find themselves, were to know their true identity, wars will cease, and they're not going to cease before that. I don't care how many peace committees you form, how many people go around saying, we want peace. We had better take a very, very close look and see what we really want inwardly. And what you want is making you miserable. What do you think causes your tears and your heartache? Something inside you, not that world out there. Don't you dare ever blame that world out there again. You're supposed to grow up. Remember we said that? You're supposed to grow up and become a person who is at least beginning to be adult, to admit his responsibility for being wrong. Do you understand that to know that you have a problem is to begin to change that problem? Begin to get into a state of true health, all kind of health inwardly, so that you're in charge. You see, you're not in charge of yourself now. Shall I tell you what's in charge? Two things. What's in charge of your life, which means you're not happy. What's in charge of all the accumulated nonsense that society handed you when you were younger and does even today? All the nonsense inside of you and all the nonsense outside of you. But if you recognize delusion as delusion, if you recognize self-defeating behavior as self-defeating, if you see it as that, see it for what it is instead of saying that it's valuable to you. If you see it as something, listen, please listen. If you see it as something that is hurting you personally, at last, you see a connection between your heartache and your tears and your doubts and your agonies. You see a connection between what is going on inside of you and what has happened to you in the past. You see connections, and you finally see the final great connection, which is a solution, which is this. If I am the only problem I have, which is a fact, nobody is your problem except you. Face it, grow up. If I am the only problem I have, then I have the responsibility for changing myself. And incredibly, it will dawn on you that the reason you should change yourself is so that you will be a happy, free, strong, decent human being. And I'll add something else to that. So that you'll be a human being, listen to this, and watch your reaction to what I'm going to say, please, because I'm going to tell you a very profound truth. What you will also know is that there is eternal life, which you don't know now. All you know is a time life with a mechanical mind. The mind creates time, and you don't understand your mind yet, and so you create time thinking. Yesterday, I was in that terrible difficulty, and I feel ashamed of myself. You're still tied to the past, time thinking, right? Or in the future, you're going to be happy in the future, and you never are. You ever noticed that? So you will be out of time completely and live fully, strong, conquering everything, because you're living in the present free moment. Now, living in the present free moment means the same thing as living with your authentic nature, with who you really are. Now, how are you going to find out who you really are? You have to find out who you're not. And you are not your past. You're not your past successes. You're not your past failures. You are nothing at all that has to do with time thinking. Who you really are is someone who doesn't need a label at all. Have you noticed the pain in labels? You call yourself, for example, you call yourself an intelligent person, and someone comes along and says, "You're not intelligent, you're stupid," and you get mad. Why do you get mad? You get mad because you said you were intelligent and someone contradicted your mirror image of yourself, and so you get angry. And also, is it very intelligent to be angry? In that situation, should I tell you what true intelligence would be? It would be if someone came to you and said, "Look, you've lived a very foolish life. That is a life of unconsciousness, of not knowing what was going on. Sir, madam, you have been leading a self-defeating life thinking that you're going someplace." And of course, our vanity is not going to take that in a friendly way. We have so much conceit in us that we say, "Who are you to tell me that?" We get afraid because we have this bundle of ideas about ourselves, and we don't want anyone to take them away from us. You are not anything you have ever labeled yourself. You are not anything that you have ever called yourself, and you don't need to be. You can live without words, without descriptions, and you can be free. Then you watch yourself when you get up in the morning. You watch how utterly different the start is. You watch how you can go out into the world and meet the boss and meet your friends. And you simply look at the world very, very calmly without being afraid of it. Because there's nothing in you that needs to get something from it. There's nothing in you that says, "I have to go and confirm myself." There's no need for confirmation. You already have it. You already have what you should have. You're free and complete. Now, how are you going to find this? At the start, you said you're going to have to explore the reefs out on that ocean that you sail daily. You're going to have to look at the reefs, and look, here's a clue, a marvelous clue. When you see that emotion inside of yourself, that irritation, that jealousy, whatever, let me tell you that you don't have to be afraid of it. You don't have to fear it. Now look, what's the alternative to being afraid? It's called examination. It's called looking at that emotion and saying, for the first time in my life, instead of reacting with fear at what I see inside myself, which is the usual reaction, instead of doing that, I can say, well, what do you know? I have anger inside of me. See, you're standing apart and examining now instead of condemning yourself, instead of being ashamed of yourself, which is the way you now do it, and which is what keeps the whole life problem going along as it does go along. You look inside as a scientist would look at something, and you'd say, I'm going to look at this and see how I can change it. And you will find out that eventually something will change it for you, and that's called reality.